Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Rich Revolutionaries podcast, where I'm joined by another very special guest. We have Lona. And I'll give you the floor to introduce yourself to the listeners, who you are, your magic in the world.
Yes, my name is Lona. I run a company called Lona Teaches Bliss, where I really help people drop into the bliss of the present moment in their bodies through several different ways. My main way that I do that is through coaching. So I do a lot of coaching and really help people find like those conscious and unconscious blocks that aren't letting
Mhm.
them live to their fullest. And sometimes that's through sexuality. We usually use sexuality
Mm.
as a lens to find those blocks, but it's really whole life liberation that I get people. We're just going like the entry point is sexuality. It's amazing.
Mm. I love it. I love it. Okay, let's dive in right there and talk about some of the common themes of blocks that you see in people's experience of your client work, and then kind of like give us a red pill, blue pill moment of what happens when they have worked with you, how they come in and how they leave.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I would say a lot of the blocks are from childhood. So really looking at how their parents treated them like relationally and how they talked about sex and pleasure is
Hmm.
really where the majority of the issues are going to come. So definitely sometimes you'll see like later in life, like bad toxic relationships will have like affected that as well. But for the most part, we're looking back at that early childhood stuff. So that could also include like religious conditioning and purity culture, what their friends were saying about sex and purity and all that stuff, what media taught them, what the books that they read taught them about sexuality. And for the most part, what I find is that most parents never talk to their children about sexuality and their own pleasure. Or if they do, like my mom did, there was like one night where she was like, okay, this is what sex is, and you shouldn't be having it, but if you do, you should use condoms.
Hmm.
So we often get this like sort of fear tactic around sexuality. And what that does is it really shuts down our connection to full body, life-changing pleasure. Because if when you get into sexuality, even if you've logically thought your way out of this process, um, once you get into it, once like the nervous system pattern is in your body that like sex is wrong or this is what bad people do, then every time you go into pleasure, that nervous system pattern will keep replaying and you'll be like, I don't know why I can't have more pleasure. And it's often because of that unconscious conditioning that's playing. So like red pill, blue pill, love this. So what they're gonna get is they're going to start to see through all of that conditioning. So I think of like your bliss as like your original frequency, and that
Hmm.
original frequency is blocked by the noise of what your parents told you to be, what society and religion told you to be in media and all of these things. And once we can kind of clear the fuzz on all of those things that are blocking that original frequency, you'll get direct access to that frequency of bliss that I believe is everyone's birthright to find again. So I also think like I don't blame your parents for the most part. You know, some of them I'm gonna have problems with, but for the most part, your parents were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had.
Hmm.
And so part of the journey is getting lost in that frequency and then being able to re-find it. So it can
Hmm.
be the most amazing journey of your life to take the blue pill or take the red pill and go all the way in and rediscover what is truly possible in your body, in your mind, in your energy, in sexuality, and then in the rest of your life. Because if you were told that it's wrong to like feel the sensations in your body, you're going to take that to your career, you're going to take that
Hmm.
into your parenting, you're going to take that into your friendships. And the core of it is in that sexuality. But once we liberate it and integrate it in the sexuality, that healing ripples out to the rest of your life for that whole life liberation.
So juicy. Yeah, I think like when we open up this lens of sexuality, it really gives us like a litmus test. Or I'm thinking of like this is so random, but I remember learning in biology like a frog lives in all parts of the ecosystem, and like the same can be said about our sexuality. So we go there, we get to see, because like sexual energy is our creative energy and we're creating our whole existence. So we get to track back like from the physical body, which I love to use in my work as that guidepost of check in of like, okay, what's going on? What are the patterns? What's showing up in relationship? So that we can have that level of awareness. And that's like step one, awareness. And then, okay, what choices do we want to make with that awareness? And okay, I want to share some like personal stories. I love to
Yes.
get into the rebirth evolution that we've each walked ourselves through, and probably also had people walking with us. So when you're talking about like how parents talk about sex or don't, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a very different experience with that. In my household, both of my parents, my dad more than my mom, were always talking about sex, like all the time. And just my dad's the type of man that like doesn't really give many fucks about what people think. Sometimes it was great, sometimes not so much. And so I actually grew up in a household where sexuality was openly talked about. And because that wasn't the norm in my friend groups and in like school and society at large, this like incongruency created a lot of like, oh my God, like don't talk about that, stop doing that, like shame towards my parents. And later on thinking about it, I'm like, okay, how has this actually impacted me? And I ended up actually having sex from a very young age. I think I was 14, like on my 14th birthday, the first time I had like penetrative sex with a partner. And I was like one of the first ones in my like class. I remember everybody was always talking about who was next. And even so, it was like there was that incongruency. Like, yes, I was exploring my sexuality, but it wasn't talked about amongst my friends except like secrets in the locker room and like behind closed doors. And so as I grew into adulthood and like I started exploring my sexuality more and having more partners, it continued to be this divide of like, okay, who I am in the intimate moments in the bedroom with partners, and then who I am with my friends and like, family and stuff like this. And it wasn't until recent years where I'm like, wait a minute, like, I don't want to code switch with different people and in different environments because that actually leaks a lot of energy. I was actually working on a post before we hopped on this call of like being that chameleon, right? Imagine how much energy it takes to like shift your persona, your how people perceive you. And then the transformation is to become a shapeshifter where you're actually able to maintain your inner essence, maintain your bliss frequency, but then like shift and evolve to what's needed in a situation, how you can show up to maintain that bliss frequency or impact that bliss frequency in the collective wherever you are. So I want to hear kind of your story of evolution with your sexuality.
Yeah, a little bit the opposite. So my friends were really open about
Mm,
sexuality and like talking about stuff and even talking about like queer sexuality early on.
mm,
I definitely identify as queer, but back then I wasn't sure what I identified with.
mm,
So it was great to have friends where like I could really talk about that kind of stuff and like there was no shame and like everyone was like, yeah, let's have fun, let's have sex. And at home, it was kind of this, we grew up very religious, and so it was like sex is reserved for marriage and just for your
mm,
husband. And, don't like if you have sex before marriage, you're like going to hell, that kind of stuff. And so it was this dichotomy for sure of like, I knew that I
Mm,
couldn't share that stuff with my mom. And I knew that if she found out, she would be like horrified of what I was doing. But then I got this freedom to operate outside of the home. And I had this really close friend, she's still a pretty good friend, who I like stayed at her house all the time.
mm.
So like I would spend the night there and it was cool. We were like best friends since like fifth grade. No, like since first grade. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of people have to go through this sort of code switching back and
Hmm.
forth. And in saying that, I love that you said that. There are obviously times where you don't want to be talking about sexuality, like at
Hmm.
work and that kind of stuff. But when I go into professional situations, I'm not hiding that part of me. I'm not like shutting down the sexuality to be in those
Hmm.
situations. I'm not talking about it, but I'm allowing myself to be in my sensations. I'm allowing myself to not be ashamed of all of those things and to show up fully. And so when we talk about this kind of like whole life liberation, it doesn't mean that you like have to talk about sex in church, although I'm definitely here for that. But it really means not shutting down your frequency of pleasure and bliss in order to go into those spaces. So, one of the clients that I work with, she has an amazing church community, and like her best friends are in church. She's an older lady. But she loves exploring her body and bringing in pleasure and finding out how to go deeper with pleasure. And she's really open about talking this about this kind of stuff. She's kind of like healing my relationship to like the older generations.
Hmm.
Um, but she knows she doesn't have to bring that side of her into church, but she
Hmm.
brings her whole self into church.
Hmm.
So I love that, we're kind of talking about this kind of stuff because this is what the society wants. These are the kind of things that society wants to know because
Hmm.
there are a lot of people that I talk to who are scared to bring this out in them because they're like, what if I can't control it out in the real world? What if I like
Hmm.
turn into this like perverted person in the real world? And I'm like, slow down, we don't have to do all of that. And it
Hmm.
can be amazing and liberating. Like, I've chosen a career as a sexual liberation coach and neo tantra teacher where I can talk about that kind of stuff in my everyday
Hmm.
life and that it's acceptable and it's okay. And if like people find out that I'm like polyamorous or queer, that like it's not going to impact my career. And so
Hmm.
some people find that like they want to choose different careers after they come into these like sexual awakenings and like live in
Hmm.
that bliss. And that's totally fine, but we don't need everyone to do that and to like take on a new career. Like we need accountants who are connected
Hmm.
to their bodies,
Oh,
who
yeah.
can like have incredible full body crazy orgasms and then go do some amazing accounting work. Like we need people in all of these professions to still do this work. I just want them to be connected to their bodies when they're doing it.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that like embodied awareness is the one thing that will ripple into so much change in every industry and every culture. And I want to share a little bit more about like a personal experience of what you're saying of how to be with the sensations, how to be with the frequency in an environment that might not be like, I want to talk about like my pussy's wet right now, you know? So, um, what started happening for me like later on in my like sexual evolution is that when I'd be in a movement class, for example, this story in yoga class, and I would get energy flowing through my body, I would feel this turn on. I would feel wet. I would feel like my erotic aliveness come online. I'm like, okay, well, this is like kind of fun, right? I'm not like, "Ugh," like for me, I'm like, oh, this is fun. It's like my little secret, and I get to share that with a partner and that be part of my experience and my expression. And do I need to share that with the yoga teacher? No. And also, can I allow this moment to be pleasurable? in my own way, in my own body. And if I want to share that with someone, I can. Because what I say in my world is like we activate our audacious frequency. And that just means our ability to be in what society would consider too much in our expression. So this can be, too much too sexual, too much too sensitive, too much too spiritual, or too ambitious, or whatever it is, right? It's just breaking the box of how we have been told to be in our bodies, which, if we're taking it back again from a more childhood perspective, when we're in school, if you go to public school, if you go to private school, wherever school you go to, even in alternative education, I worked in a Waldorf school, and it's like sit in your seat and pay attention. Don't move, don't talk to your neighbors, don't like flail around. But the reality is, especially at a young age, we have so much energy coursing through our body, and energy in motion wants to stay in motion. It's literally the laws of physics. And so, how do we raise our children and create our businesses in a way that allows us to actually leverage the too muchness, the audacious frequency? I want to hear your experience or client like case studies on that.
Yeah, I call this the battle between being too much and not enough. So
Mm,
either like even with the same client, the in some ways they'll be like, I can't express this. Like I feel like I'm too much here. I feel like I'm too loud. I feel like I'm too, sensual that I can't experience this. And then at the same time, maybe in the same session or the next session, they're like, I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I can't please my partner. I feel like I'm not doing good enough in my career. So we're always in this battle, and society has intentionally created this battle because it keeps us occupied, where we're
mm-hmm,
trying to be good enough and we're trying to not be too much, and there's never a good balance, and person to person, the script changes. So, like for me, if we want to share some personal stories, I was often too much. I was the very sexual person. So even like in high school, like I was that girl who was like having sex with people. I was the one who was talking about sex. And there was a lot of people who were like, you're too much. You're like way too
mm-hmm,
much. Whereas like
mm-hmm,
at the same time, like in my own head, I was like, am I enough? Like, can I
mm-hmm.
be enough for these guys that I'm having sex with? Like, are my skills good enough? And it's like crazy for me to think about that at
Right?
like 16. I'm like, am I good enough? I'm like, you didn't even fucking know what sex was. Like, you barely knew anything. Like, how dare anyone hold you to any standard in sexuality when you're just exploring and you're just discovering? And so, just, I mean, and even now, I feel like I'm exploring and discovering. Like, we
Mm-hmm,
try new things and we do different things.
mm-hmm.
And so, I feel like we drop into this like beginner's mindset very
Yeah,
frequently, and just allowing yourself, like, I'm just giving you permission to like be bad at sex sometimes. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to be perfect all the time. There's no like, I guarantee if you're having sex with a man, I guarantee he's not sitting there nitpicking like everything. And if he is, fucking leave him, because that's not fucking cool.
yeah, absolutely. Something that you illuminated here with this like too much, not enough polarity really is like the worthiness wound. And like you said, it is this thing that has been conditioned into us from society. Because, like, if we really think of worthiness, like, and enoughness, that is something that is so inherent to being alive. Like, does a plant, like, do these flowers ever think about their worth? Do they think about, oh, am I like radiant enough? No, right? And we are just as these beautiful flowers, this expression of nature. And so, what happens when we're constantly in this mind game of enough, too much, not enough, then we kind of put this extra layer on top of our natural beingness that is a performance. And that shows up in our business and that shows up definitely in the bedroom. And when we're talking about like being a teenager and having sex, like I think most teenagers, at least this is how it was when I was a teenager, are having sex as a performance, and it is not about pleasure. And so I'd love to hear how you bridge that transformation from sexual performance to focusing on sensual pleasure.
Yes, yes. Amazing question. And one thing that popped into my mind while you were talking about that I want to mention to people is that when it comes to like worthy and deservingness, I feel like this is a wound that we all deal with, but I think that because we hear so much like you're worthy, like you deserve stuff and all this amazing like positive culture, when I ask people in sessions like, do you feel like you're worthy of this pleasure? They almost always say yes. They almost always
Mm-hmm.
say yes. They're like, yeah, I deserve it. I'm like worthy
Mm-hmm.
of it. But then I'm like, do you feel safe enough to get this pleasure? And then
Mm-hmm.
that starts ticking the clock of like, okay, are you confident enough to get this pleasure? Are you feminine or masculine enough to get this pleasure? And so it really becomes this, we're like digging a little bit deeper into that worthiness and that deservingness, into
Mm-hmm.
finding like what really is the issue. And I think for a lot of people, it is worthiness and deservingness, but we've kind of like turned that on its head in society now. So it
Mm-hmm.
just is an offer to like go deeper. And then how do we actually go from someone who doesn't feel like they're enough, someone who's performing for their pleasure, which let me tell you is completely normal, happens all the time. Even I sometimes drop into it where I'll be like,
Oh yeah.
I want to like look this certain way. And we go to like sex parties and stuff too. So especially at like a
Mm.
sex party, it feels
Mm-hmm.
very performancy. And so I ended up creating my own sex parties to like combat this,
Oh.
where we try to like drop into connection and pleasure and that kind of stuff before we go into the sex. But besides that, when I'm really working with someone, I want them to work on their solo pleasure first. So
Mm-hmm.
when we go into having sex with a partner, and this is true of the tantric lineage as well, when you're working through the tantric experience and especially tantric embodiment and tantric pleasure, it always starts with you first. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you don't understand how pleasure works in your own body, the advanced techniques are going to it with a partner. So if you're just
Mm-hmm.
diving into the advanced techniques with a partner, you're always going to see the most issues come up there. So
Mm-hmm.
I always encourage people, if you don't have a pleasure practice of your own, to start working with your own pleasure. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
just wrote a blog about this. It's called How
Mm-hmm.
to Have Mind-Blowing Orgasms. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're focused on three things when it comes to mind-blowing orgasms with yourself. And the first is pleasure. So really diving into what actually feels pleasurable in your body and trying to do things that get you out of the mind into the body. Like before we started this podcast, we did a little dance to like get into our bodies. I'm obsessed with dance. I love
Me
dance
too.
because it's one of the fastest ways to drop into the
Mm-hmm.
body and out of the mind because it
Mm-hmm.
combines a lot of the holistic tools of Tantra, especially breath, movement, and sound. And when you
Mm-hmm.
do work, when you do sounding work, when you do movement work, or when you compile them all together and do them at the same time, like often dance is, then that is always going to take you out of the mind into the body. So try to be in the body when you're doing pleasure, adding breath, adding sound, adding movement, especially sound. This is one that I find so
Yeah.
many men and women are so
Mm-hmm.
nervous to make sound when it comes to pleasure. But I
Mm-hmm.
encourage you to find a space you can make sound. So maybe you have
Yeah.
kids, maybe you like live in an apartment building, it's tough to make that
Mm-hmm.
sound. Try to make just a little bit of sound. And then try
Mm-hmm.
to find spaces that you can just like fully like
Mm-hmm.
yell if you want to. And I promise that you'll feel more pleasure in your body if you make sound, and you'll shut down
Mm-hmm.
the pleasure when you try to not make sound. Because there's a
Mm-hmm.
connection between the throat and the pussy and the
Mm-hmm.
cock. There's a direct fascial connection between the
Mm-hmm.
two. And so, yeah, just open that up. So, pleasure. So, start with pleasure. Number one, build pleasure up in your body. And I really encourage people here if you have like a go-to pleasure, like you watch porn every time you self-pleasure, or you use a vibrator every time you self-pleasure, or you have that like one go-to move that is like always how you orgasm. I encourage you to explore pleasure beyond that one way because you'll never get to the next level of pleasure using this level's tools. So
Mm-hmm.
just explore pleasure, build it up in your body. And once you get to like an 8 out of 10 pleasure, if 10 was orgasm, then you're going to start to expand the pleasure into your whole body. So where attention goes, energy flows. So
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to place your attention on different parts of the body, maybe your hand, and you're going to keep
Mm-hmm.
pleasuring through this. So I love to like place my attention on my heart when I'm doing this, and it
Mm-hmm.
draws that energy up into the heart center. Now, understand if you've never done energy work before, it is a very subtle experience,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you first start. Once you kind of develop the sensitivity, you'll start to feel it more and more. But it is super subtle to begin with, but it's a lot easier to feel when you've got pleasure flowing through your body. So pleasure ignites energy, so that makes it easier and more fun to feel, in my opinion. So you
Mm-hmm.
get the pleasure moving. Once you get to an 8 out of 10, you expand the pleasure with your attention throughout your body. And then the third step is surrender, which will lead to an altered state of consciousness, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
describe orgasm as this
Mm-hmm.
altered state of consciousness. So once you get to a peak level of pleasure, whatever that means in your body right now, it doesn't have to look like muscle spasms of the genitals, but it could. Then you're just going to surrender. So that surrender could look wild and primal and energetic, or it could be like super serene and it could be like
Mm-hmm.
relaxed. It could like bring you back down. So don't try to think of what the surrender should look like. Just try to
Mm-hmm.
be with the pleasure in that peak experience and see what your body naturally wants to do. And then once you get to that altered state of consciousness, then you just have fun. And a lot of times I'll self pleasure and then I'll like do work, or I'll self
Mm-hmm.
pleasure and then I'll like go to a party, or I'll self pleasure and then I'll meditate even. And so you're taking that altered state of consciousness to like more expanded areas of your life. So I don't just
Mm-hmm.
keep that stuff in the bedroom. I bring that whole body experience out into the world.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought the conversation there. So I was thinking about implications for like our work, right? And I ran a challenge a month ago, 2 months ago. I'm not sure about time, but it was called Born to Be Wild, and the whole point of it was to allow your wild aliveness, your turn on, to be the billboard that sells for you. And there is nothing in the world that is more magnetic than someone who is in their pleasure, in their eros, in their sexual energy, and allowing that to be seen and heard too. I love that you brought the voice into that, into the conversation. So I remember like when I was first exploring my self pleasure and like shifting from like, oh, actually, I don't actually want to watch porn anymore. I don't want to use vibrators anymore. I want to really get into the depth of my own sensual experience and allow my awareness to expand that without external stimuli. And in that, my literally whole life transformed. I like moved to a different country. I shifted careers. I started creating different types of relationships and I launched my whole business. And so this really like, I think some people who are in this paradigm of hustle culture, of live to work, of like maybe not even realizing survival mode, can see pleasure as this like frivolous thing that's like, I don't have time for that, or like, maybe at the end of the day, like whatever, whatever. But really, like, it is this third door, it is this shortcut to getting what you want and doing it by being who you are rather than being in that performance chameleon mm, archetype of expression. And okay, where do I want to go with this? Well, is there any
Well,
threads you want to pick up on?
first, yes. First of all, if no one here was in Born to Be Wild, it was an incredible experience. Oh my God, you brought your
Mm.
everything to that
Yeah.
experience, and I was obsessed. I loved listening to your little voice chats and everything, and I just got so much out of it of like, how do you be like this new age business owner, this like new earth business leader that
Hmm.
isn't, we're not like taking the old patriarchal script that's like we have to be out of our bodies, we have to separate the business from the wildness of the self. Like, let's
Hmm.
have wild businesses and just drop
Yes.
into that. And you gave such amazing like content ideas too, where it's like I feel like
Mm.
a lot of places, a lot of these challenges miss out on like the nitty-gritty of it. Like, what do
Mm.
I actually post then, you know?
Yeah.
So I was obsessed with that. But another thing that you pointed out was that most people think that pleasure is frivolous, or it's like the
Hmm.
reward at the end
Hmm.
of the journey. And what I say a lot is that pleasure is the compass. So
Hmm.
allow pleasure to lead you into the next level. And if you ignore pleasure, you're going to be ignoring those root core issues that are actually holding you back. And
Mm.
so your orgasms are trying to tell you something. Your
Yeah.
orgasms are trying to tell you, A, you're not in your body enough, or you're not asking for what you really want, or you're people pleasing and you're fawning
Hmm.
and you're giving in and you're not speaking up for yourself.
Hmm.
Or for me, my pleasure was saying, you're going too hard. You're not, you're like disconnecting from yourself and you're like focused on the other person's pleasure too much.
Hmm.
So I really needed to like draw it back into myself and figure out like, okay, maybe I'm having 10 orgasms, but how do I feel afterwards? And there was like this
Mm.
emptiness that I was feeling
Hmm.
after pleasure that
Mm.
I was like, there's got to be more of this. I'm going to get like burnt out on this if I keep going down this path. So what happens is like now I don't come like 10 times in a session. I'll come like a few times in a session, but each of them drops me into my body, into that surrender, into that
Mm.
wild primalness, and then that
Hmm.
fuels my life. So
Yeah.
pleasure no longer feels like it's draining me, but feels like it's
Hmm.
refueling me, which has been an
Hmm.
absolutely incredible journey. So
Oh
I
my
say
gosh.
find
Yeah.
what the compass is trying to tell you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What you just said has so many implications when we're looking at energy, right? We're looking at pleasure through this compass for where is our energy going? And in my own experience, I started noticing sometimes I would orgasm in a downward direction, and sometimes I would orgasm in an upward direction. I'm like, what's going on there? And really allowing the energy to like complete a whole cycle and be in that like regenerative energetic, which then when we're looking at our businesses, when we're looking at our families, our friendships, are those also honoring this regenerative cycle of reciprocity where what energy is going out is also coming in so it can expand rather than deplete. So when we're looking at like traditional business, a lot of the energetics are rooted in this transactional energy where it's give and take. Well, that's missing the whole cycle. And so, of course, people are going to get burnt out in this model because there isn't that expansion happening. It's very like, I don't know if you've heard this, I've seen it a lot in like therapy worlds of um, like horizontal people are relationships and then vertical people are relationships. It's
Mhm.
like horizontal, it's we're kind of just floating on the surface. We're kind of just being in the persona, in the conscious mind, in the performative level. But when we like flip it and we bring it into this like vertical awareness, then we actually get to dive into the unconscious parts of the psyche, these archetypal realms of power dynamics, of relationship dynamics, and allow that like depth of who we are on a soul level to be radiated out into our work, into our friendships, into our family. And that is what actually creates a blueprint for a new reality. And it's going to be so unique to each of us because our organic template is unique as many people there are on the earth. And so when we come into relationships, which in my perspective, the foundation of a business is relationships, then it's important for us to A, be connected to our embodied awareness, B, be connected to our pleasure so that we can create relationships, we can create businesses and offers from those pathways rather than this template of performance that is taken from, well, like most of what we see in traditional business is from like 200 years ago, these like old white men who decided to create it in a certain way. And for some people, that works. You know, some people have built like multi-million empires on that. And for others, that is never going to be coherent with your template. And so, can we just give permission for everyone to create their lives, their relationships, their businesses in a way that is unique to them, to their pleasure and their expression. And I want to hear a story from you of what have you done differently in the way that you have built your business?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Love this topic because, yeah, I went to college for business.
Mm,
I got my
oh.
degree in marketing, and I realized afterwards that it was really marketing for huge corporations. So, what you
Mm-hmm.
learn in marketing school and in business school in general is like if you have a multi-million billion dollar corporation, like this is how to attract clients. This is like the sort of science behind attracting clients, and it's this very like masculine attempt to
Mm-hmm.
have business. So it's like you cold call and you post ads and you kind of like get into people's worlds where I didn't even know that there was a different way until our business coach taught us all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. And really, I was like, I don't want to do it like I'm a big corporation. Like, even if I become a big corporation, I still don't want to use those tactics. So,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries became a big thing. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that a lot of these huge corporations, and I worked for a huge corporation as well. I worked for a Fortune 100 company before I
Oh.
started doing this kind of stuff. And it is cutthroat. It is like you
Mm-hmm.
produce or you're freaking out. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to keep up this level of production. And I remember one year I won the biggest award that you could win in the position, the management position that I was in. It was called the President's Award, and it was like this huge celebration. I got to like go to Cabo, like on the company's
Mm-hmm.
dime, and it was like this whole thing. And then next year, they up your freaking budget by a ridiculous amount again. So they're like, hey, you did a great job. And next year, good luck repeating this. And then 10% on top of this as well. So
Mm-hmm.
there was never any, understanding that like we can't keep producing at this level. And so when I started my business, it was really about like, what is going to actually help me be able to show up every day. So especially doing this kind of work where I'm coaching people, like I have to be like 100% in for these people that I'm coaching because I want
Mm-hmm.
them to get their money's worth out of this. And for me to show up 100%, I can't have a packed schedule 12 hours a day. I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so really setting these boundaries in my business that were like, hey, I coach Tuesday through Friday 10 to 6. And if you want to see
Mm-hmm.
me outside of that, you're going to pay me more money. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to like rearrange my schedule for
Mm-hmm.
your healing. If you want this healing, I'm calling you in to like figure this out how you're going to do it. So I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to put in more work than my client is going to put in. It's like a version of
Mm.
like calling them into their higher self. Where I know a
Yeah.
lot of coaches who are like, oh no, I'll coach at like 8 o'clock at night, or I'll coach on
Mm-hmm.
the weekends and all this stuff. And I'm just like, if I did that and I didn't get the time away to have the connection with my partner, so we can
Mm-hmm.
have true, like, solid, deep connection. And my partner's an engineer. So he
Mm-hmm.
works, the 7 to 5-ish kind of schedule, sometimes more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to have off nights, or at least most nights, to be able to keep dropping in with him and to keep replenishing myself with pleasure. And then giving myself permission to, like, especially like the first day of my bleed, I'm giving myself permission that if I have a client that day and if I don't feel like I can show up 100% for that client like that, I'll text them and be like, "Hey, it's not going to work out today." And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay too. And I'll take the whole day off and I'll, like, rest and I'll rejuvenate. In the middle of my day, I go for walks. Like, I actually take like an hour lunch at least, and I eat really
Mm-hmm.
nourishing foods from my house, and then I go on a really beautiful walk afterwards. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, bringing in the entire life to my business and not having my business be this, like, separate thing and then
Mm-hmm.
my life being this separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough, like, working from home too, because there's
Mm-hmm.
less of that division. So I have to, like, create the division in some ways, whereas, like, I have these
Yeah.
cutoff times that, like, I won't work after that if I can,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it happens and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
or giving myself permission to, like, sleep in. Like, I think sleep, if I'm not getting enough sleep, like, I'm not going to be able to show up. And sometimes, like, the universe is, like, dropping crazy things into my sleep, and, like, the craziest, wildest dreams are happening. And so I'll give
Mm-hmm.
myself permission. Like, I usually have like 4 hours of my morning routine in the morning. So I'll be like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I don't have to work out today. Or, you know what? I'm going to shorten the morning walk. Or I'm going to make breakfast faster than I usually do. To just give myself that permission to, like, take the time that I need and let the business flow. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in the business, there'll be, moments where I'm building, where I'm changing things, or I'm creating new things in the business
Mm-hmm.
that requires me to work more. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to that. But I'm not going to do that all the time. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
create the resources in my business so that I don't have to show up every day at 100% to, like, run this
Mm-hmm.
business. But allow myself to have pleasure. Like, if in the middle of the day I'm like, man, I can't focus and I could just sit here and, like, scroll Instagram for an hour, or I could go self-pleasure and I could draw the energy into my body, I'm gonna freaking do that because I
Mm-hmm.
can do that because I'm my own boss. And if I had an employee as well that was like, oh my gosh, like, everything's going wrong, like, I can't focus, I would tell them too, hey, take an hour, go pleasure yourself. Don't scroll Instagram for that hour, but go pleasure and then come back and, like, see what is available here. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just, like, building these, like, feminine businesses is really what's going to save our planet and save all of
Mm-hmm.
us from falling into these traps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, allowing that more of like fluidity rather than the rigidity. It's like, yeah, we're still gonna get what needs to be done to move the needle forward. And like that gets to look different each day. It gets to look different each season. Like, for example, for me right now, like it's winter time and I'm feeling like I have less energy. I just did a big sprint with the challenge that I did. We just
Mhm.
moved. A bunch of like unexpected things happened in my reality. And so I'm allowing myself to do like, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 hours of work every day, which, you last, not last month, 2 months ago, really time is not. I was doing like crazy days, like 16 hours, which I would never do all year. And when we are in this identity of the New Earth CEO, yes, it's the foundation of business is relationships. And the relationship that we have with ourselves is the antithesis to every relationship that we have. And so being very connected to, again, our internal cues and to our desires so that we can make these adjustments with attunement to ourselves and then also give permission to our people to do the same thing, right? When we're in this role of newer CEO, it's not just our programs, it's not just our posts, it's not just our trainings that are the value proposition, it's who we're being. Hmm. Okay, we've opened up the door of desire. And I want to blast off into what your vision is, what your big idea is, what sometimes I call it the 100x New Earth vision is for where you want to see this collective evolution moving into. Paint us the vision.
Oh, paint us the vision. Where is it headed? Oh my gosh. I see women just taking up space in this business era. In a way that doesn't take away from our motherhood. It doesn't take away from our like female aspects or like femininity in a way that doesn't turn us into men either. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
want it to be the full force, the fierce force of the feminine coming through and creating businesses that are rewriting the script so that we have these incredible woman-owned businesses that are saving the planet, that are
Mm-hmm.
rewriting our addiction to our phones, that
Ooh.
are using AI in a way that
Mm-hmm.
is productive, in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't steal everyone's data and enslave us all with having to, come to Meta with because our data's all there. I see every business being led from a place of bliss, like everyone is tapped into their original frequency of bliss and allowing that to come through in business too. I see it being philanthropic as well, in that we're
Mm-hmm.
giving back to communities instead of just taking from communities.
Mm-hmm.
We're giving back to those communities in different ways and different, whatever inspires you to give back. Like, there is not one way to give back. Whatever, wherever your heart wants to give, I want to see those kind of things happening and that kind of giving happening. And so we're creating like this new Earth CEO that I love that you talk about, that's built on connection, that's built
Mm-hmm.
on regeneration, that's built
Mm-hmm.
on sustainability, that's built on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And one sort of metaphor that I was reading the other day is back in the day, like over 10,000 years ago before the agricultural revolution, there was, we lived in like 150 person clans, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a hierarchy. And that was totally normal. So the strongest, the fastest people, the people who shot the arrow the straightest, those people were at the top. And they typically would eat first. And so like the best protein was given to the top people, and to the leaders. And the people underneath them understood that they were actually getting something too. Because although
Mm-hmm.
maybe they were eating second or they were eating last, they were still eating. So the people at the top still made sure that they got to eat. Maybe they were just eating something different or not, the prime cuts of meat. Um, and they also understood that if something happened, if a, pack of gorillas showed up overnight, the first people to put their lives on the line were the strongest, the fastest, the straightest arrows. So they understood that even though they weren't at the top, the people at the top were going to protect them. And now you look at business, and the people at the top are making thousands times what the people at the bottom are making. And I'm not saying that that can't happen, but they also don't take the hit when a hit needs to get taken. So
Mm-hmm.
when the company is needs to hit the numbers for the stockholders, instead of them taking it out of the CEO bonuses, which is where that kind of stuff should be taken out of,
Mm-hmm.
they end up just firing the people on the bottom of the totem
Yeah.
pole. So we're still seeing this hierarchy, but we're not seeing the benefits and the, expansions that come from having these
Mm-hmm.
hierarchies in place. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and now not to say that there aren't some companies doing it, there are absolutely some
Mm-hmm.
companies where the CEO is like, you know what, we didn't make it, so I'm not going to take my bonus this year. Or there are CEOs that are like, I'm going to take, $50,000 out of my own paycheck because instead of firing someone. And that is the kind of stuff that I would love to see in this new earth,
Mm-hmm.
where the people at the top understand that they're not just at the top because they're the smartest or they're the fastest or they're the strongest, but at the top because they're the ones that are going to take the hit when the hit
Mm-hmm.
needs to be taken. And they're the ones that
Mm-hmm.
have to stand up to the stockholders to say, hey, this is a business for people, and we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
get very far if we just fire the bottom of the totem pole every time the economy bubbles up and down. Because we need
Mm-hmm.
these people. We need these people to have a successful business.
Mm. Oh my gosh, I did not know where you were going with that. And I was so here for the ride. And I haven't heard that perspective before, but I love it. I love it. And what I hear in that at its core is this call for integrity.
Yes.
And if we want to break down the etymology of integrity, it means to be integrated. And to be
Mm,
integrated is to be able to navigate these complex situations, both in the highs when things are going well, when profit is growing, and also in the lows when profit may not be going. Maybe there's like some internal issue. It's like, can you lead through all of it and not be so rigidly attached to these external perceptions that ends up negatively impacting the people who have allowed you to benefit, to have what you have. It's remembering that wholeness and remembering the village. And I'm so passionate about that and creating brands and businesses and movements that actually feel like home. And okay, I'm gonna pull out a hand done drawing that I
oh,
created today. Here
I
it
saw this.
is.
Yes.
Yes. So I've been talking about this pretty much on every episode, anywhere, any platform, anywhere anyone will listen, is my 100x New Earth vision is what I was calling the farm, but now I'm calling it an agrihood, which is a new term that I learned, which is basically a community that is centered around agriculture in a sustainable way. So in more of a like suburban city landscape, this would look like instead of having, grass, that it would be a garden. And instead of having like the center of the town be like maybe a mall, it'd be like a massive garden. And so what I'm envisioning into creation is that model combined with an eco residential retreat center build so that each person that ends up being a founding member of this project gets to have their home, gets to have access to whole quality foods and water and regenerative energy and community and a space to share their purpose rooted offers, a place for child rearing. We have like birthing center, jungle, unschooling programs. And then also like communal kitchen that's fed through the food forest, and learning centers so people can come and not only experience the offerings of the people who are going to be creating things in the retreat center, but also learn from the model to be able to populate more of these agrihood eco-residential retreat center models. And so this is my heart's highest desire. And I am so excited to be putting more energy into that because I feel like this past year, those points that you were saying of like scrolling on Instagram, addiction to phone, of just like a lot of output in business and consuming so many other people's blueprints. I'm like, whoa, what are we doing here? So I've actually created a time block in my calendar, and I don't usually work with time blocks, but when I'm introducing something new, I do. So it can get to be the scaffolding that eventually becomes a flow. And so that is something that I created in my time block today. And I want to share that because you never know who's listening. Maybe somebody here will
Oh,
want to build, will want to learn, will want to contribute to that project. And I'm just so excited.
yeah,
Okay.
I love that you're starting to lead this and that you're having the conversations to understand what it will really take to like create this new Earth
Mhm.
CEO so that you can kind of like become one of the first ones that like steps up and like really tries to build something in this way. And I'm sure through all of these podcasts, you're getting like these different like
Mhm.
looks into it. And so you're like, I'm going to take
Exactly.
this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this and combine it all together. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, you're on to me. And I've seen a few of these attempted, and it either goes one of two ways. One way, it'll be like the investor has fuck ton of money, has like sold a business, invested in this, and then it's just operated in the same way as any other business, right? And there isn't this like rooted community of co-creation.
Yeah.
So there's that. Then I've also seen it where no one has any money and it is very like spiritual, ethereal, nothing's really getting done. And a lot of times it comes to be like kind of culty, which we don't want. Right. And so the crux of this actually being successful, rooted in reality, is relationships. And so this is why I've created this podcast. This is why I create my offers in the way that I do, is to really get into the intricacies of what creates a relationship that is regenerative and that, of course, there's going to be conflict. Of course, we're not going to all have the same values and belief systems. And how can we still coexist in a harmonious flow? And harmony doesn't mean perfect balance, it's a dance. How do we dance together to create this new earth? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the biggest issues because I've seen these kind of spaces before too. I belong to a space out here. It's like a burner retreat center where it's like a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of Burning Man people kind of have events at this kind of space. And I would say that the biggest issue in these communities is how do we come together and how do we like make it work on like a relational level?
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of been involved in like kind of like how do we come back together after like rupture has happened? How do we like get
Mm-hmm.
back on the same page and not like just make people leave or that kind of stuff? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it really is going to come down to like integrity and that again that root of like how integrated in yourself are you and how do you
Mm-hmm.
take that forward into this community? So yeah, it's tough because what we gave up when we left the community-based style was we gave up the community, but we got to be less burdened by the community. We got to be like less inconvenienced by the community.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I live in my own house with all of the stuff is mine and you know only people I want to have there are there, I live in convenience. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
inconvenient now to live in
Mm-hmm.
community, but we have to start to open ourselves back up to that inconvenience because the benefits of community are better than just inconvenience. And you have to get everyone on
Absolutely.
that same page.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're talking about here is like this big social program of prioritizing short-term gratification over long-term gratification,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
that's a whole other podcast. But we're gonna cap it off here. And before I let you go, I want to give you the opportunity to share any offers that you have on, any events that are upcoming. What are you inviting people into right now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Yeah, again, I'm a neo tantra teacher and sexual liberation coach. Would love to have you on my website. It is lonateachesbliss.com or follow my Instagram at Lona Teaches Bliss, Lona. And I have a Temple of Bliss, which is my online
Mm,
membership. We meet twice a month to do online workshops together. I do public workshops in Seattle, Washington. So if anyone is in that area, come see my public workshops. They're amazing. They're my favorite things.
mm,
I also do private workshops. So I do workshops online or in person in Washington. And those are completely custom. I like custom build a workshop to your
mm,
specific needs. And then I also do my level 10 is the one-on-one sexual liberation coaching, where you'll get that whole life liberation through your sexuality. I work with men, women, and non-binary people to bring them
mm,
that original frequency of bliss again.
beautiful, beautiful. And all of your links will be listed in the show notes below. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your energy, your presence, and just for being you. Mhm.
Thank you so much
Mhm.
for having me. Can't wait to see where this goes for you.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Mhm.